Hello everybody and welcome back to Suzerain. So in the last episode I was going to go ahead and just pick up where I left off, but I guess I was thinking that I messed up something when I turned around and saved the last time, and I thought my save files got wiped. So I was going to go ahead and just jump back into it and play it as normal. But of course when I started it back up, I saw that everything was gone. So I went ahead and started playing it again. I was finna just go ahead and skip to where I was before, but there's been an update. So I think I mentioned it previously in the last episode that the developers did mention that they were going to change some things in the beginning because it was kind of confusing. So if you look at it over here, you'll notice that when you get to diplomacy, and I think also when you get to immigration, I don't think this was the same as well. They've changed it a little bit. So instead of before where it said basically you could either try and get new allies or try and go back with your old allies, which left it kind of vague as to what you were trying to do until you really start getting into the game, and then you start looking at it that if you look at a lot of the old allies that you were associating with as far as the countries go, they were a lot of capitalist countries, and the newer allies would be some of the countries that had revolutions, and now they've went to the more socialist / communist side. So now if you look at it, it's been changed. In diplomacy, it says the intensifying global rivalry between capitalist Arcasia in the west and communist United Contana in the east is opening new diplomatic possibilities. Sordland could take steps to align itself closer to one. So that makes it far less confusing than it was before. Also, you have the choice of doing neither. I'm actually kind of curious because what the general vibe that I've gotten from this game so far, and I'm perfectly fine with that also, is that it seems like you're going to have a choice between either you're going to have to pick a side. That was kind of the general feeling that I got before in this game, was that you're going to have to pick a side because you're not going to be able to really leverage yourself to deal with these gigantic superpowers. But this kind of makes it a little bit more interesting. It makes it seem like you might be able to try and, I don't know, maybe work with some of the old countries that are around you and possibly try and build up to become a superpower yourself and might be able to fight things off. That would be kind of interesting. I would like an option like that. I'm also perfectly fine with either siding with, joining NATO or joining not NATO, but the not NATO faction in here, or the not communist faction in here. I'm perfectly fine with those options too. But I actually would also like an option where, you could turn around and possibly become your own superpower and maybe either have some communist leanings or capitalist leanings, or who knows, maybe even your own economic system. Or if you really want to, you can kind of be a fascist, or whatever. So, or you can be your own version of the USSR, whatever. I would like to have something like that. And that's kind of the implication that I'm getting from right here, is that you might be able to do something like that. Anywho, I did say I was going to go ahead and go along with the more socialist route in this particular playthrough. Again, if you want to see me do a different playthrough, I'm more than happy to do it. Also, again, if you want to see me turn around and do all the little codex entries and stuff like that, I'm more than happy to do that also. So I mean, I'm perfectly fine with it. There's a lot of stuff in here. I could probably make a whole video by itself with just doing the codex entries. But anywho, I'll go ahead and get back to this. So let's see, Arcasia in the west and in the east. I am going to be siding with the east. In recent years, Bludish, Westic, and Agnolian immigrants flocked to Sordland due to relaxed immigration laws. I think this was different before too. I'm going to keep the immigration laws relaxed. Again, I think that was different. Also, the next screen has changed. So if you remember before, it had essentially where you could have a budget and you could choose to increase it or decrease it based off of, whatever you were trying to do. Whereas in this one, now it's changed to what your term focus is going to be. You have also promised to focus on certain extensive subjects within our first term. The people expect us to solve the negative situations within these topics while providing an overall improvement of policies related to them. You need to pick at least one, and you can pick more than one. So, that's a little bit different now. So I guess you don't have to focus so much on the budget now, or maybe that's going to change as soon as I get into the game. I'm not sure. So I have not played this version. I'm guessing this just came out. I do want to focus on health and education. I'm not going to focus on the military. Again, I want to be more diplomatic. And I want to try and decrease the military because that's going to be a huge part of the budget. I will focus on law enforcement too, but most of my stuff won't focus more so on trying to get more law enforcement in the country. It'll be more so trying to change the way things are going on. I don't know if I mentioned it in the last one. I think I did. But basically there is also a kind of beef between the military and the law enforcement in the country, because like some countries in Europe, they have a gendarmerie, which is a military police that can intervene in certain things. This country has one of those as well. I want to either move the gendarmerie into the Justice Department, or I don't know, at least get rid of the department altogether. You know, maybe having something similar to like the United States, where you have the FBI and you have, the Department of Homeland Security and things like that. So it's not necessarily a part of the military. So I want to demilitarize everything so that way we don't be a gigantic dictator. Now, in my own personal playthrough, I'm probably going to be a gigantic dictator. I love doing stuff like that, but not for this playthrough. All right. Your promises will be remembered and they will have consequences. Are you sure about your decision? Yep, I sure am. Okay. Now, as far as this goes, I'm just going to go ahead and skip past all this because I'm going to assume that it's all going to be the same thing. I'm going to get back to where I was previously. So give me a moment. Okay, I have to cut in again because this has changed a little bit too. So in the previous one, if you remember, there was an option to choose to be like more about being united or more about addressing the problems that are going on in the country, things like that. This is a little different. So this one, and it might not be as clear, but you can kind of see where you're kind of going with this. Dear citizens of Sordland, brothers and sisters, my fellow swords. So I think if you kind of look at this, my fellow swords, I believe there is a little bit of a problem in the country as far as the identity of Sordlands. So this could be seen as more of a nationalist statement. Brothers and sisters, that can be kind of seen more as a socialist thing to a certain degree. Dear citizens of Sordland can be more of the just kind of straight and narrow path. I could be wrong about this, but that's kind of the general feeling that I'm going to get. So let's choose brothers and sisters. The crowd looked very eager to listen to me. The idea of unity, the current dire situation, change and hope. So let's do change and hope. You, the people, have chosen. Together we will bring prosperity and reform to our nation. It is a time of hope. It is a time of change. We stand together, we prevail. The issues that plague us. We stand together, we prevail. So I think this is pretty much similar to what we had before. But this is different. In the past, there have been times of survival, times of conflict, and economic hardship too, but whenever we stood together, we prevailed. I promise you, we will stop the recession and eliminate poverty. The future awaits us. It's time to turn our faces to the West. First, we must rewrite our broken Constitution from 1929. So again, this is different. Before, in the previous video, it was more about vague, grandstanding stuff, the typical things you hear from politicians that says a whole lot of lofty things, but they don't actually say anything at all. Whereas this one, you can kind of commit more to actually doing things. Now, typically, these things can go either way. Now, for instance, if you said this here in the United States, I promise you, we will stop the recession and we will eliminate poverty. That can go either way. You can hear that from the left, you can hear that from the right. Typically you might hear that more from the right because they tend to focus more on the economy and business, whereas the left tends to focus on more social issues, and that's supposed to kind of ricochet into the economy and things like that. Whereas this, I think the future awaits us. It's time to turn our faces to the West. I guess you can kind of say that can also be kind of a different story too, because I guess that means we can look towards building our own empire or something. I don't know. So that's kind of vague as well. I'm not sure which way that could go. But I think I'm going to focus on rewriting the broken Constitution. So because that's kind of the main focus that we have here. The reformers want to do that. There's an overwhelming consensus among most of the population that our Constitution needs to be reformed. Now, as far as which way that goes, completely up to you. But I'm going to focus on that. I won't really focus on the recession and eliminating poverty and things like that. So I think that'll kind of come about as I deal with the politics and everything else in between. First, we must read our Constitution. It is time for a united and powerful Sordland once again. Change now, not in the next decade. Okay. And I will take this. I think these options were here before. So, yeah. Alright. And I will raise my fist just as I did last time. And of course, all this is essentially the same. I don't remember if Sergey had a last name. I think it might have just been Sergey. I could be wrong, but okay. Yeah, this is all pretty much the same. Again, I'll skip ahead past all this because we've already seen all this. So give me a second once again. All right, now I'm back to where we essentially were last time. No journal entries or codex entries we're going to be looking at. So this one I kind of want to start talking about the news here because I didn't mention this in the last one. Well, actually I did mention it, but there'll be news articles that kind of talk about certain things that's going on around both the country, and they have news articles for I guess you could say the different factions and so on and so forth. So if you click on this right here, you will see you have a news menu. And these are the major news publications for each particular, well, just for the country in general, also for the global politics as a whole. But even these have certain side leanings to them. And some of them even have people that are in connection to these papers that you will run into and stuff like that. So say, for instance, Sordland Today. What you'll find is that Sordland Today is kind of like I guess you can say almost the New York Times to a certain degree. And what I mean by that is that they seem like they're kind of middle of the road and things like that. But, you know, anybody that knows about the New York Times here in the United States, they're owned by Rupert Murdoch. So, and Rupert Murdoch owns Fox News, and, you know, I can get into a whole spiel about Fox News, but yeah. So they tend to be seen as a somewhat biased, and you can even kind of see it there. It says Sordland's most sold newspaper to a certain degree. I thought it was kind of leaning more towards the fair and balanced thing that Fox always says. But Sordland Today, if you come over here to the Codex entry, you will notice that Sordland Today is a part of this. So let me see. I think it's under organizations. Not the factions. Oh, political process got to update. Great. Non-government. Where is it? Where is it? I am failing. Corporations. Of course it would be under corporations. So, right? It's under corporations. It's not under corporations. I hope I'm just blind and I'm not seeing this right now. Maybe it was taken out, because I do remember that Sordland Today was supposed to be a part of the Heart of Sordland or something like that. But I'm not seeing it right now, so. Which is fine. I can just go over to people and then go that way. So I want to say it's Conrath. Yeah. So, and this is a person that you're going to meet later on in the game. Conrath Coriani is the CEO and majority shareholder of the Heart of Sunderland conglomerate. It says HOS, but that's what it means. He is the man who created the famous brand of Corianti through his highly successful business ventures and motivational quotes that inspired generations of entrepreneurs. He always promoted a victory, no matter the cost approach to making business a success, which also drew criticism from those who parted ways with him on his ventures. The rise of the Heart of Sordland conglomerate is entirely on the shoulders of Conrath Corianti, who acquired small companies in critical industries where Sordland was lagging behind. His competition and performance-oriented attitude allowed him to disrupt these industries and dominate them. He has 5 children whom he said to have raised without excessive wealth and privilege. So actually I have to change that a little bit. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Conrath Corianti dies and his son takes over. I could be wrong about that. We'll see here in a second. But you're going to have dealings with this paper. So, and There are many parallels you can draw to it. New York Times is one again. Sky over in the UK. There's so many different parallels you could draw to it. So, but you'll kind of get that feeling later on, and you'll see what the consequences are if you take off the media. As you can imagine, here in the United States, we've already seen how that kind of works. So, anywho, we'll focus on just what's going on immediately in front of us. So, first paper you'll see here is the Whole Sword Post. If I'm not mistaken, I think the Whole Sword Post is probably the most unbiased one out of all. I think they don't really kind of tend to draw certain lines. Sordland Today and, of course, The Radical and The Economist, they both kind of take different stances depending upon certain choices you make. So, as you see right here, the Whole Sword Post, Rand spoke of change and hope. President Anton Rain has been sworn into duty in a great ceremony in Whole Sword. Thousands have attended the ceremony where President Rain has met with his supporters for the first time after his election. In his inauguration, Rain spoke about change and hope, bringing focus on reforms. Together, we will bring prosperity and reforms to our nation. It is a time of hope. It is a time of change, said the new president before he went on to start his first day in the Maroon Palace, aka the White House. So, now we'll move on to Sordland Today. President Anton Rain. The new president has been sworn into office by the Chief Justice, Orso Hawker. Another great win for the USP and Anton Rain, who managed to get 37% of the general vote. Now, if you got that here in the United States, you probably could win an election, but you probably would lose. So, whereas overseas, I think it typically deals with like the UK system where the person that has the most votes gets the chance to form a government, and if the party that gets the most seats gets to form the government, and if they can't form the government, then they have to build in a coalition. It basically makes it almost impossible so one party can dominate, whereas over here in the United States, we have a two-party system. Again, it depends upon the Senate and Congress and stuff like that. But as far as the presidential election goes, it's based off of the Electoral College. So I believe I saw an article here recently on 538 where I think the lowest threshold you could have as far as votes go is around 30-something%. You could possibly win 30-something% of the vote and still become president based off of the Electoral College. You know, most infamously, if you look at President Donald Trump, he won essentially based off of about 27,000 votes in, I think, 3 or 4 different states. So, you know, even though he lost by 3 million electoral votes as far as the popular vote goes, because he had the strategic amount of votes in certain states, that was all you needed. So, again, you know, it's kind of hard to win, but you can definitely win and be very unpopular at the same time. Anywho, that's our politics. That's not these politics. So, yeah, back to this. The first congratulations came from Kasarl Kibner of the National Front Party. The runner-up of the general vote, the PFJP, didn't concede until the last minute, but the results were clear since several hours in. Thousands of supporters have gathered in the streets of Whole Sword, chanting campaign slogans, waving flags, and displaying USP party banners to display unwavering support to the newly elected president. The public mood is very positive in the capital from all accounts on the ground. The city is celebrating that a Whole Swordian has become the president of Sordland. So, yeah. And I think that actually changes depending upon what background you choose. If you remember in the beginning, you have the 3 choices of where you actually came from. You can either be from, I think if you're poor, you come from Dare. If you're middle class, you come from Whole Sword. If you're the upper class, I think you come from Lechevin, which is where all the universities and stuff is. So, yeah. Next, we're going to move on to the Lechevin Times. Again, I could be butchering these. I'm so sorry. President Anton Rain has been elected the 4th president of Sordland in the 7th Swordist elections. United Sordland Party has won the election on Sunday with just over 37% of the vote, while Franz Richter, the leader of the People's Freedom and Justice Party, could gain just over 20%. Kasarl Kibner, the head of the right-wing National Front Party, is in 3rd place with just over 11%. The Communist Party and Workers' Party of Bludia both won just below 10% of the vote, failing to pass the 10% election threshold. The new term begins with the opposition of PFJP and NFP under the USP government. The unrepresented votes below the threshold resulted in the USP taking 52% of the seats in the Grand National Assembly, giving them the lawmaking power. The new seat numbers have been finalized as follows: USP 130, PFJP 70, NFP 40, and the Independents 10. What type of actual system is that? The new term begins with the opposition of PFJP. Okay. The unrepresented votes below the threshold result in the USP. Oh, okay. So if you don't meet the threshold, they automatically go to the party that wins the most seats. So yeah, you can imagine the reason why most people would be pretty pissed about this, because again, if you have the majority, that basically means you kind of have an unfair advantage, because typically, again, it kind of depends, I guess, going from country to country. But like here in the United States, the incumbents always tend to have an advantage more than a newer party or anything like that. You know, it's a lot of things that's kind of based around. It's based off of incumbency. It's based off of name recognition. It's based off of so many different factors. But you could guess that, like, let's say, for instance, with the PFJP, if I'm not mistaken, if I looked at the codex, they're kind of a newer party to a certain degree. So whereas the USP, they have always been around to some degree, so they kind of have an unfair advantage. So I can understand the reason why people want some type of change, because the advantage is always going to go to them at the end of the day. Then again, you can kind of blame the people for always voting them in at the same time. So it's a half and half deal. Anywho, the radical. And as you can see, the headlines are going to kind of change based when it comes to these particular headlines. So another USP president. How many times will the people fall for the same trap? We've seen this before with Colonel Sol, who supposedly saved this country and brought stability in times of chaos. His stability, however, meant a life of oppression. Any opposing voices were silenced, and many were persecuted. Next was Alfonso, who was elected as the liberal reformer to bring change to the USP and Sordland. Seeing his unfortunate inability, his own cabinet resigned. As the third USP candidate becomes president, it is high time to realize that real change won't come from their party. So as you can see, they're more of a left-wing paper. They don't like the fact that we've been in power for so long, and they pretty much got a right to kind of feel that way. But anywho, and now The Economist. The Economist is more focused on the business side of things, which means they're going to focus more towards business. They're not going to be caring typically about the politics unless it benefits them to a certain degree. So, restructuring the infrastructure. After recent successful mega infrastructure projects from the United Cantana and Volksland, this is another place that we're going to have to kind of keep an eye on. They're, I think, allied with the United Cantana, but I believe there's some beef going on there. I'll read this in a second. The world is warming up to the idea as a source of growth and employment, but is there any truth to this success? Our investment analysis indicates that infrastructure investments can be fruitful in the short term, but even more so in the long term, especially if they focus on linking economic nodes that business logistics depends on. This is, however, the first step. The crux of the matter is diversification of investments where the government supports employment and growth. It is key to help private businesses with government contracts, tax breaks, and political support in order to create a self-sufficient, dynamic economy. The government's role in Sordland should be to integrate to the world economy and reap the benefits of global trade. Economic growth and income inequality in this country won't be fixed otherwise. So, as you can kind of see there, they're more focused on globalization and, of course, giving contracts to private businesses, tax breaks, and stuff like that. And, of course, supporting them politically to a certain degree. For instance, this is kind of a thing here in the United States. If you remember, well, of course you remember, it's not like it's been that long. When you look at the COVID-19 crisis here, if you look at how the world responded mostly to the COVID-19 crisis, most places in the world, they shut down most businesses, they shut down their economies to a certain degree, and they also paid their citizens with UBI, Universal Basic Income, to kind of deal with the short-term losses that you would kind of deal with in order to prop up the economy while things was going on. Whereas here in the United States, we kind of had a different response. Our response was, we need to turn around and bail out businesses and stuff like that, because if these businesses fail, then they're not going to be able to survive. We shouldn't really focus too much on the people, because, the people, they're going to always be able to find work to a certain degree. Now, of course, nobody really said it like that, but that's kind of the general assumption that was kind of here in the United States. So whereas like other countries, they receive, I think it was like $2,000 a month in certain cases, we've received one check of $1,200 dependent upon, your economic situation and stuff like that. And that's not even including the fact that there are many people that haven't got unemployment and things like that. So that's another issue all in of itself. But we have kind of a mentality here in Sordland that is kind of, I won't say similar to that, but it does have some type of correlation to it to a certain degree. So it's trying to say that the way for us to get out of this recession is to bail out these companies. Or I guess you can kind of say it's similar to when we had the 2008 financial crisis, where we looked at what was going on here in the United States and we said, oh, we need to bail out these companies because they're too big to fail. Now, I'm not going to get all into the politics of that. That's not my field. I did go to school for it, but that is not my field of study or whatever. So it's either or. But yeah, that's pretty much what you can say here. They're trying to say that we need to bail out the big companies and we can't let them fail. Also, that the infrastructure that we need to build up, we need to focus on the major infrastructure areas. So to kind of give you an analogy for that, or kind of give you some type of example for that, here in the United States, we have something called the Rust Belt, for instance. The Rust Belt is kind of the Midwestern areas. They used to be the main manufacturing hubs of the United States. They've fallen into economic depression because most of the manufacturing jobs here have left the United States and gone to China and other countries and stuff like that. So whereas we have like the more urban areas like New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, places, Atlanta, places like that, those have become the economic hubs here, whereas those rural jobs have kind of lost all those jobs or whatever. So they're basically trying to say you should focus on building more infrastructure in those major financial areas like your New York, your Los Angeles and stuff like that. You shouldn't focus on those rural areas like the Rust Belt and things like that, because it won't do that much in the short term. So it's that long-term economic type of thing. So again, I'm not going to get too much into the politics of that, but it's up to you to decide once you turn around and, start playing the game. The next article we have is End of Stolen Onyx. A new era begins for Sordland, and it holds many economic questions that will need to be answered by President Rain. Our top economic analysts, with consultation from the National Business Council, have released a comprehensive report on the performance of the past 20 years. A certain section of the report stands out. The last two 4-year plans of the plan doctrine created a budget deficit and a clear reduction of the industrial production output due to mismanagement and inefficient bureaucracy. The year-on-year growth, budget balance, and production index values indicates that the two most productive consecutive years had been when the privatization program of Alfonso began in 1949. Our editorial team, with the help of experts like Mikhail Avin and Edith Agnock, have come to the conclusion that the recession was not actually caused by Eduardo Alfonso's bold privatization program, but by the drastic obstruction of state executives hindering the plan. What else do we got here? President Rain must take the advice of planned economy proponents around him with a pinch of salt. Otherwise, he could find himself in the same spot of Tarquin Sol in the mid-40s. So, again, this is another major problem going on in the country, is that we have this recession, and there's the idea of what kind of caused the recession. So Tarquin Sol, even though it kind of sounds like he's a dictator to a certain degree, he was more of a planned economy type of president. He wanted to have, the command economics that you have of socialism and things like that. The government controls things. You give it to government-sponsored companies and stuff like that. Whereas Alfonso had the idea of we should kind of open things up. We should, get more private contracts in. We should have more globalization, bring in work from countries overseas because they have better technology and better methods. That's what we should turn around and do. Now, again, not going to get into the politics of that, but you can see how this kind of relates to certain things here. I think, in my opinion, it kind of leans more towards how China how you have the issues. Well, I guess you can say the idea of China opening up its economy. You know, there was the time when China was far more closed off, and then they decided to open up their economy more to people and things like that. And now you have the China that you know now. And that's kind of always been a lukewarm question of like, what is China? Is China actually a socialist country, or are they a country that's turning around and trying to just say that they're socialists in order to kind of control things and stuff like that? I believe that they say that they are socialists with Chinese characteristics. Again, I don't know. It's not my field of study, but you can see how these kind of relate to certain things in real life. So you can kind of help navigate this. So, anywho, now we can kind of get into the crux of the game. So this is the main screen of the game. I'm kind of going to be fudging this a little bit because I'm using my touchpad on my computer as opposed to a mouse. But this is the overall map that you turn around and get. Now, this area, all surrounded by green here, is your country. As you can see, you have quite a bit of country to turn around and deal with. Now, these on the outside, these are different countries in and of themselves. As you see down here, you have Wayland. So as you remember during the beginning, Wayland had a civil war that we turned around and participated in. Let's get out of that. Over here, we have Lesbia. Again, you can read articles based off of that. We have Volsglen, with which I'm pretty sure is going to play a major role in this, because if I'm not mistaken, I think the country of United Contana is pretty far away. So Volsglen is the kind of major power that is close to us. So if we started working with the East, we would probably work more with Volsglen, but I think Volsglen has some issues with United Contana as well, but we'll see. And up here, this is the Republic of Agnolia. And over here is our bastard sibling up here at Rumberg. They've been causing troubles. This is probably going to be a big issue that we're going to have to deal with. So that's going to be a thing. And I think that's pretty much it as far as the countries that we have to deal with. Now, you'll see that you have these little yellow icons on different particular parts. As far as the exclamation point, that means that you have either a decision to make or you have certain meetings and things that you can go to. So over here, this is just a report. So I'll read the report from Lechaven. This is about the port of Lechaven loses importance. Let's see. The port of Lechaven loses importance. The latest marine traffic report shows that the port of Lechaven is no longer the busiest of the Marcopan continent, falling behind to the 3rd position. While this is a negative indicator for our administration, Lechaven still has the potential to shine again as a major trading center. The port of Lechaven is the largest port of Sordland and holds enormous importance for the economy, particularly as the main distribution center, linking the capital and the inner parts of Sordland to the rest of the world. The major port city will hopefully keep supporting a possible economic upturn in the entire country if the investment project succeeds. If I'm not mistaken, I think also Lechaven might be a little bit more rural too, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that though. Read the report from Arvery. Lack of investment. The mayor of Arvery, Eric Neal, reports a lack of adequate infrastructure around Arvery, which seriously undermines the attractiveness of Arvery's investment climate. Foreign investors, particularly from Agnolia, are becoming hesitant to invest in the city. Meanwhile, according to the data published by the National Business Council, around 19% of a company's total expenditures in Aglan is absorbed by logistic costs, while in peer regions, this figure is below 10%. So our National Business Council really doesn't want us to invest in there because they feel like it's a very rural area, basically. So, low production in Aglan. The report calls attention to the alarmingly low levels of productivity growth in the region of Aglan, where there is also high rates of food insecurity, malnutrition, and rural poverty in the inner parts of the region. So that's going to be an issue. And that doesn't help that that's going on there, and we have a neighbor to the north who really wants to invade us. They might be able to try and use that against us. I'm sure that's not going to be a problem at all. And up here we have Agnolia. They want to congratulate us on our victory. Congratulations from PM Van Horden. Prime Minister Van Horden congratulated us on our election and praised our party's stance on just and transparent elections. He signaled his wishes to continue the trade partnerships between our countries as equal partners, as opposed to the earlier trade deals which he believes that gave Sordland unfair advantages. So that's going to be a problem as far as trade goes. Over here, Volsland wants to turn around and give us their congratulations as well. General Secretary Hagel sent his congratulations on your great victory and wished for close cooperation between our countries in the future. He signaled about concessions from Volsland in case of a promising trade deal. He congratulated the Sordish democracy for the successful elections and warned us about the threat of Arcadia's growing influence poses for Eastern Marcopa. So they want to work with us. They think that they can turn around and, if they give up some certain things, that they might be able to work with us. So who knows? Maybe that's where we will go. That's where we're going to go as far as this playthrough goes. But we'll see how that goes. Congratulations from President Alvarez from Lesbia. President Alvarez congratulated you for the results and spoke about his hopes to have a beneficial partnership deal in the future. He sent his best wishes to the Sordish people and warned us about the threats of the encroaching Melanesian influence of United Cantona from the east, emphasizing the importance of unity in our continent, Marcopa. So that's going to be a problem. But I need to see what leanings he has, because he might be leaning more towards Arcadia. And then last but not least, the Republic of Wayland, who we fought a civil war with. Or I think we assisted in the civil war. I need to read that again. President Smolak sent his congratulations on the election victory and wished for a cooperative future between Wayland and Sordland, signaling a desire to normalize the diplomatic situation between the two countries. So that's going to be a thing. Now, if I could have it my way in my own personal time, I just want to conquer all this and then just try and take on the other superpowers, probably get destroyed. But, that's just me. And now we're going to go back to Holsword in the capital. So, as you can see, we have several things that we can turn around and choose. We can read the report from Holsword, we can partake in the political overview meeting, or we can attend the economic briefing. Now, of course, we're going to do all of these, but these are just things that you can turn around and do. They're going to have choices in them that will affect certain other things going on in the country. So let's read the report. The mayor of Holsword reports that the rising population and the fast urban expansion resulted in high levels of congestion in the city traffic. The logistics report underlines traffic and fast route as the biggest problems in the capital. The mayor also reported that the absence of a modern, technologically large land-based logistical center where all transporters come together is one of the greatest problems for domestic transporters. Because Holsword is a big metropolis, transporters are scattered all over Holsword and having established such centers in 10 different regions. So that's going to be a problem. We're going to have to try and do something about all the congestion. Surely we won't get anything that'll help us with that. Let's partake in the political overview meeting and then we'll go to the economic briefing. Peter Vectern arrived a couple of minutes early and sat across from me. He was struggling to hold back his smile. We did it, Anton. We won. Finally, years of hard work paid off. In our university years, could you imagine we would be sitting here in the Maroon Palace? We have to celebrate this great victory. I'm not going to celebrate right now. We'll celebrate tonight at the inaugural ball. Looking forward to it. Evelyn hopes to congratulate you in person there. Let's see. I'm sure the kids would love to see their Uncle Peter for the first time as vice president. And yeah, we're good friends. If you also remember, Peter was the one that turned around and helped us when we were protesting and things like that. That's when we actually met, way back when. Oh, I don't remember this being a thing too in the last build, but now of course when you hover over the name it shows that this is the vice president, so that way you don't have to literally go in and see what this is. And of course that's his article right there. That's great to hear. It's crazy how fast the two have grown up. You're a good father. Peter seems lost in his own thoughts for a second. Now, Peter's an interesting character because from the feel that I've gotten from him is that he's going through some personal things, possibly with his wife and other things as well. I don't know how that's going to affect things later on, but if you've ever seen the trailer for this game, you'll see that everybody has ties to everything and everybody has their own little dark secrets. So You can't trust anybody. Everybody has secrets. Suddenly, the door opened and Lucien Galad walked into the presidential office. He was a stern-looking man with a strong presence. After briefly observing the room from wall to wall, he moved on to the chairs. He is our chief strategist. Gentlemen, the tall case clock in the room struck 3 o'clock. Damn, you're exactly on time. Hello, Peter. Lucien then turned towards me. He very slightly bowed his head. Glad to see you, Lucien. Doesn't look shifty at all. It was a privilege to be here, sir. We will start the meeting by evaluating the current situation. The majority of the Swordfish people demand change. They are more concerned about the economy than the Constitution, but they blame the system for their problems. People are losing their trust in our democracy. They expect us to bring the change the last government did not. Franz Richter, leader of the Reformers, believed that true change can only be done by transferring some of our powers to the Assembly. I will move into the details of their demands shortly. Now, this is where you can kind of start crafting how you're going to go forward. And what your strategy is going to be. There's a lot of different strategies that you can choose. I think in one playthrough I chose to work with, I wanted to keep all my dictatorial powers and basically even try and get more power in the process. But it basically kind of got into a round the way conversation where the only way I could really get that was if I turned around and had other concessions in the process, or I had to try and work with other factions. Again, we'll see how it goes in the final game, but I'm really curious to see just how far you can go with certain things. But for now, I want to help reform the Constitution, so that's what I'm going to focus on. I agree with the reformists. Our responsibility is to democratize our current broken system. That's exactly what we campaigned for, a true change for the country to move forward. We will need many allies against the old guards in government. And of course, the old guards are the Supreme Court and the people that were formerly allied with Tarkon Sol, who gave them the power in the first place. Mr. Richter managed to influence many members of the Assembly to give their support for drafting a new constitution. Reformist politicians are quickly increasing in number. While the reformers wing inside our party is still a minority, they could have a tripartisan majority in the Assembly, especially if they unite under Franz Richter. USP reformers aren't wrong to agree that we need to change, but we should be in charge. Mr. Richter could be a potential ally in our goal to maintain a majority in the Assembly. Or you could try and get your party to fall in line. I'll work with Mr. Richter. I think we pretty much agree on many of the same things. And I'll get into his codex entry in a second. He's definitely key in this. Reformist demands are clear. They want to limit the president's veto power, ensure that the Supreme Court is independent, and take away their right to vote on the constitutional amendments. Now, this could also read as something that we kind of want here in the United States. Kind of one thing that's universally kind of agreed upon across the board is that the Supreme Court kind of has way too much power here in the United States. Now, they are the final say in things. The problem with the Supreme Court is that it's kind of twofold, but the main focus is term limits. In the United States, when somebody is appointed to the Supreme Court, they're there for life. So you could literally have certain situations where, for instance, you have Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch, who was appointed by Donald Trump. They're relatively young. Unless something crazy happens, they're going to be there for at least 40 to 50, maybe even 60 years. God only knows. Right now, there are a couple people that are on the Supreme Court. I think Clarence Thomas, he was appointed by Ronald Reagan, if I'm not mistaken. So you have these issues where we're kind of behind on certain things because we have people on the Supreme Court that have just been there forever, and they just are completely outdated when it comes to the thinking of it. So, we kind of need to have at least term limits or something like that. I know Pete Buttigieg, when he ran for president, he proposed having, I think, expanding the Supreme Court, but also, I think, changing how often they serve and how many can be appointed. So basically, it would have boiled down to every president would get to appoint a certain amount of Supreme Court justices, but it would always be a balanced court. So it kind of forced people to turn around and well, it would kind of force the Supreme Court to always be balanced and make actual decisions that, you know, are beneficial to the country. Whereas now you could have a situation where, like, not like now, if, like, let's say if Donald Trump wins, there are certain people on the Supreme Court that are very old, so he would naturally be able to appoint somebody else if certain things happen, you know, God forbid. Then it would basically be leaning one way or another based off of those things. So while, you know, you have our Constitution that we hold sacrosanct, you could literally have a situation where a person could get in office. If certain things happen, they could appoint nothing but Supreme Court justices that agree with their opinions, and there you go. You could literally have the Constitution interpreted any way you want it. So this is kind of what's going on here right now. So it's kind of a twofold problem. The president has way too much veto power, which here in the United States, the president does have veto power, but it can be overruled if the Senate has a 2/3 majority vote, which have to be, I think, 70 or 80 votes. It's almost impossible to have this happen because of partisan politics. The only time I can think of here recently when the president was vetoed was, I think it was near the end of President Obama's last term with the whole Iran thing or whatever. I think they vetoed him in that particular case, and then that turned into a crap show. So, yeah. But they want to ensure that the Supreme Court is independent and take away their right to vote on constitutional amendments. Now, I want to say this might not be a thing here in the United States. Yeah, I don't think this is a thing in the United States where the Supreme Court can vote on constitutional amendments. To my understanding, that's left up to Congress. So if Congress makes a constitutional amendment, that's it. Now, of course, people can sue, and then it can go to the Supreme Court, which will then interpret it, but that's pretty much all they can do. It's not a literal case where the Supreme Court can just say that you can't do this. As long as everybody's okay with it and nobody takes it to the Supreme Court, it's fine. So I support the reformists. We need a proper balance of power in this country. I agree. It's better not to go against the winds of change that is raging around the country at this moment. The old guard will do their best to preserve the Constitution. Chief Justice Hawker, Chief Justice Hawker and his allied judges have a great influence over the Supreme Court, which will be tough to break. The court also has an abrupt power over constitutional legislation. Without their approval, we cannot even change it. Let's see. Well, we got to break the power of the Supreme Court one way or another. I agree. They have too much power over sordid politics. We need to take away their vote in constitutional legislation. It is absurd that an unelected branch gets to vote for bills. Boy, ain't that the truth. We cannot allow obstructionists to exist within our own government. That could be taken so many different ways. We will figure it out. Our party still holds 130 out of 250 seats in the assembly. That is power. However, to reform the Constitution, we must receive a 2/3 majority in the Grand National Assembly, which is 166 votes, and a simple majority in the Supreme Court that equates to 6 votes. After we have settled our thoughts on how to proceed, we will need to talk with our party figures, reach out to the other party leaders, then convince the justices of the court. And God only knows what that's going to take. So, because I'm not sure on how the politics work right now. I think we only have 3 kind of assured votes. And then it's going to get even more tricky because I think one of the Supreme Court justices was, as I mentioned in the last video, is basically our attorney general. So that's going to be weird because if, we make her mad based off of certain things, she may decide, okay, I'm not going to vote on your amendment. And that's going to cause all types of problems right there. So the entire process will take a long time, but we must start working with a reform committee to evaluate all possibilities for a new constitution as soon as possible. And then, as I said before, you can kind of choose certain things you can do. If you want to continue working with the old guard and protect your existing powers, you can. if you want to work towards a new constitution that's going to give you even more power, you can do that. Now, the way it seemed like it's going to go is that you're still going to have to give up certain things to the reformists because they have so much power. But there's also the implication that, who knows, maybe you'll want to work with the National Front because they want certain things too. Maybe you can work with the communist and blutist factions as well. They can, maybe you can get them to get some more people as far as elections go or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of things that you can turn around and do in this game. But we're going to write a more democratic constitution with the reformists. It seems like the easiest route. I'm sure it's not the easiest route. That's what we've been preparing internally. People elected us because of our promise for democratic reforms. The key thing here will be strengthening the power of the assembly, which we already lead with the majority. Peter nodded in agreement. Yes, the division of power needs to be rebalanced for a better Sordland. According to the initial draft we made with the reformists, there are 2 changes to the Constitution that are not open for their discussions. Lucian opened his dossier. First, the Supreme Court will no longer vote on constitutional amendments. I have no problem with that. Second, the president's absolute veto will be taken away. This can be replaced with a limited veto system by fixing the current loopholes. So essentially, I think they just want to change it to the veto system that we have now. That we have here in the United States, where again, the president can veto anything he wants to, but at the end of the day, if it's vetoed, it goes back to Congress, and Congress can choose to try and veto the president's veto, and then it becomes law. Again, it'll be really hard to do that, but you can do that. So I'm assuming that this is what Lucian is kind of alluding to, is that we can just replace it with something else in the process. So I have no problem with these clauses. Let's work with the reformists. Yes, sir. Lucian nodded. We will form a reform committee together with all parties and start reaching out to all the stakeholders in the assembly and the court for a new constitution. More information about the request of each parties and reform contents will be available later this year. Lucian took notes. Another important point. We must be aware about the Lauterbur Group. The oligarchs convene under this group to influence economic policies. According to reports, some members of the National Business Council are in their pockets. They will surely try to bribe us for their special economic interests. So the Lauterbur Group, if you look at it, the Lauterbur Group was founded by Noel Tusk, who used to be the economic advisor to the King of Sordland. Currently, the spokesman of the organization is Walter Tusk, the grandson of Noel Tusk. Officially, it is known that Lauterbur has no clear structure or leadership, but the spokesman is the de facto leader of the entity. This group convenes every 3 months at the Hotel Berg in the village of Lothar. The meetings are secret, but many analysts suggest that topics like the economy, security, and international politics are discussed. Its members are mostly hidden except for the speaker, Walter Tusk, who acts as an official spokesperson. Conspiracy theories think the future of Marcopa is decided at this conference, but most likely the richest and most privileged discuss strategies and the events unfolding around the world. So the Lauterbur Group is essentially the Bilderberg Group here in real life or whatever. The Bilderberg Group is a group of basically high society types, mostly business leaders or foreign leaders and advisors and things like that. They meet at the Bilderberg Hotel, and no one knows what they actually talk about, but there's a lot of belief that, they turn around and part of the Illuminati, bullshit like that. And of course, they decide what goes on in the world. Again, whether that's, you believe that stuff, that's up to you. But yeah, that's pretty much the real life equivalent to that. So yeah, we're going to have to deal with Walter Tusk, and we're going to have to deal with the oligarchs, and that's going to be a huge problem. So, because yeah, that's going to be a huge problem. You see what's going on in Russia. You see what's going on here in the United States. So dealing with economic interests like that is probably going to be a huge pain in the ass. I will enter a dialogue with them eventually. We need to be diplomatic. I don't know how you can be diplomatic with them, but hey, whatever. Lucian looked at Peter. As far as I know, Simon Hall has some ties to this group. We may try using his influence. if we deem it necessary. I'm aware of Mr. Hole's wide network. That will come in handy. We just need to be careful. We need to tread carefully on all sides with all power players in order to survive our term. Lucien looked at his watch. Well then, gentlemen, precisely 30 minutes. This has definitely been longer than 30 minutes. This concludes our political briefings for today. Our next meeting will be about our media strategy. Talk to you soon, sir. I will keep in touch. See you in the next meeting, Lucien. Anton? Lucien and Peter bid their farewells and left. So, that's our first little economic meeting, right? Well, not an economic meeting, but our first little political meeting about what's going on in this country. And as you see, we got some more news articles. Not necessarily about things that we talked about in here, but some possible advice and things like that. But we'll get to that in the next video, and I'll leave it right here. So again, thank you for watching. If you have any suggestions for me, please leave it in the comment section. If there's certain things you would like to see, please let me know. And again, if you want me to read all the codex entries and stuff like that, also leave that in the comment section. If you like the video, like the video. If you didn't like it, don't like the video. If you like me talking about the politics, you know, cool. If you don't like me talking about the politics, also cool. I try and stay as middle of the road about it as I possibly can, but I'm just trying to give you an idea of how these things relate to what's going on here in the game, or just trying to give you an idea of how to kind of correlate it to what's going on into the game. So I apologize if I take it to a certain degree that may be offensive to anybody or anything like that, but it's not intended. I'm just trying to give you an idea of the politics in the game. So again, thank you for watching. See you in the next one.